Hello and welcome to another mystery video. Look, we're looking at healing season 2 dungeons, but looking really at the tier list, and I think is from tyrannical to fortified week, what are the harder dungeons? Sorry, I hit my microphone there. What are the harder dungeons here to heal? What are the harder mobs to heal, and how do you rate them and kind of decide where the healing fights are? And I thought I'd best way to do this with the tier list, and then people can write their comments of arguments of why they like or agree or disagree with my choices. Look, let's go Freehold. I think Freehold, so we'll do Tyrannical Week. So this is Tyrannical Week. I'm going to rate for healers these dungeons from the, worst thing to heal to easiest thing. I think Freehold's a pretty easy fight. I'm probably going to put it at around C level. Like, the first boss, a lot of avoidable. Yes, there's one dot you have to heal through. At the start's probably the most dangerous on that first boss, Squawks, if a double pistol shot comes off. But otherwise, not much healing. Second boss of Eudora, if you avoid, not much healing. And you usually lust for it. The shark boss can be annoying, but it's either you're gonna die or avoid it. And then the last boss, of course, doesn't really get healing intensive for that middle bit, but you probably have lust and then the damage bonus, and then it's a pretty easy place to heal. So I probably put it as C. What about Uldaman is my S tier for Tyrannical Week. That first and second boss are insane damage checks, insane healing checks. You've got blades with AoE healing. 3 and 4, the last two bosses, Uldaman, not that bad, but those first two bosses are definitely pug killers. And not having people on those high keys using their cooldowns correctly or overlapping, that's an instant wipe. So I think Uldaman is definitely an S tier. Neltheris, let's say, I don't want to say it's S tier. Like, Magmarox is, of course, like a very good gate for Tyrannical, but I don't think the rest of the bosses are as healing intensive. Like, the maybe it is S tier because the Anvil guy, he's pretty rough to heal, but it's also just like a continuous AoE healing. It's not as spicy as Uldaman, so I probably put it as an A. This is hard to heal, but it also is a DPS check, and it also is just plain consistent damage. There's no like single healing and AoE healing. You're just either doing a bunch of AoE or you're not, and some of the bosses aren't as hard. So I'll probably put that as an A tier. Vortex Pinnacle is going at the top as an A tier, even though maybe it's an S tier because even though the last boss is the worst thing to heal in this expansion, and then that is just so much damage. It's only the last boss. First and second boss. First boss, you barely have to heal. Second boss, you get a haste buff and you just spam heals. It's actually pretty fun. The last boss is a huge DPS check and probably the reason you'll wipe. And I actually might put it to S tier because I think it's that overtuned, that DPS check, that once you get to 21, 22 is like, it's so much damage, and usually, majority of the time, people aren't hitting that DPS check, and you're just going to die, and most keys die in Tyrannical Week for VP, and I think that's why it's an S tier from the last boss. Nels Lair, first boss, just managing the scales. They don't die, you can tee people up. It's still a lot of damage on the first boss for Tyrannical Week. The problem with this boss is the worm boss. The totem boss, no worries, but the worm boss is probably the biggest issue here. So probably this is an A because that's a lot of healing. That poison is, even with lust, it is such a healing intensive fight, and that's why I put A. You could probably make it up to S week, but I think A because the other three bosses are pretty negligent, negligent with the I can't even say that word, negligent to healing. So I think just because there's only one threat here, it's kind of like Vortex, but it's not as bad as Vortex. So I think if you have the right classes and dispel removal, but it's still a lot of healing, and I'll probably put that as an A. Balls of Fusion, I'd really put that B or C, really. I think that none of those fights scare me as a healer. They're just kind of, I think it's a pretty easy dungeon. I'd probably put that as a C, even for healing wise. The first boss, second boss, third boss, nothing, there is healing, but it's nothing too crazy. Just like you've got another output, you can heal. There's no tricky individual healing. It's not overtuned. I feel like it's fine to heal, and I'd probably put that to do a B or C. I think it's a bit harder than free. Brackenhide Hollow. Let's see. It's only these one bosses. Like, the gash does a lot of damage, but the tree and the tree and the last boss with the totems, if it's you got good DPS, you won't have any problems. Like the vortex, if you have good DPS, you still probably have to do a lot of healing in that fight. But Bracken, you can avoid all the healing if you have good damage. So I might even put that as a B. Is it as easy as Halls and Fusion? Yeah. We'll put it up to an A just because of the first healing fight. That the gash wound is a lot, and the single tart bleed is a lot on that first fight. And then usually in high keys, people don't interrupt as much on the last boss or kill the totem in time, and it can wipe you. So I'll put it up to an A. And then Underrot. Ooh, let's just see. This is why Freehold Underrot is such good keys. Like first boss, if you interrupt all the cast, there's literally no healing. Second boss, Krogmaw. If people stand on the worms, you only have to hold a cooldown and personal for like maybe three tantrums. Like maybe it goes up to a C, the tantrum boss. But poison boss, again, like there's no damage unless people use only one or two explosions unless people miss. And the last boss just a healing intensive fight. Maybe it comes up to a B. All right, for tyrannical healing, but I really don't think so. I think it's a very low K. So I would definitely put these as the worst things that heals in Tyrannical Week, follow on to A, B, and C. Like, yeah, I think that this will probably summarize my fear when going into heals and pugging with people. Now, if you don't pug, it can be different from your healing choices, but I think if we're a mindset of pugging, this is how I'd rank keys and healing wise and what you bring in for Tyrannical Week. Right, Fortified Week. Does that change our decision making of the dungeon? If I was going to heal for Freehold and Fortified Week, what have we got? Again, this is why Freehold is not even the bellows are kind of annoying for the heal early on, and there's the pack for the last boss, but really this is a really good key. I'm not threatened by a Freehold in Fortified or Tyrannical. It's just an easy key. I'm like, yes, it's healing, of course, every dungeon is healing, but there's nothing here that really scares me. Either mobs can be stunned, interrupted, kited. There's only like two really unavoidables, and then the Beckoning Hallows, which you can line of sight. So I really put Freehold really low. Neltharis, probably a hard key. Like for Fortified, you're looking at there's bleeds, there's frontals, there's slams, there's unavoidable damage, there's dots, there's some mobs jump and target, and you have to there's a lot of single hit healing, and if people aren't utilizing the chains correctly or the tanks getting slammed by Tank Buster, this is probably a hard key to time and heal on Fortified. Is it S? I don't know. The Hunter Bleeds are a lot. They could probably push me up to an S. I think you would probably put an S maybe with the timing. I think because to time Nelth, you want to do big pulls, and big pulls with outcomes suck. So a lot of the time, with the chains, your tank wants to pull a lot and stand. And during that time, with multiple mobs, it's gonna be multiple blades, it's gonna be multiple jumps. So like if you're pulling pack to pack, it's not too bad, but you're probably not gonna make the timer in a high Fortified key. But if you're doing large pulls, Nelth becomes an S tier dungeon because there's a lot of bleeds coming out, there's a lot of frontals, there's a lot of healing. You're doing larger pulls to make the time. Halls of Infusion definitely jumps up to an S tier, for sure. There's a lot of, again, bleeds and channels, and there's the poison from the frogs is deadly. There's some, things you can't see. The breath from the dragons that if you don't have the group, they can remove the dot. There's a lot of healing. The Inundate, which can be line of sight, but usually people don't know that. I think Halls of Fusion is a really hard Fortified key to heal on high keys. Underrot shifts up maybe to B. I mean, around the Krogmaw, where a lot of the percent comes from those charging, the charging screeches and the interruptible lashes and the frontal from the worm, things aren't controlled, they can quickly escalate. And I wouldn't say it goes up to A and S though, because they're pretty scripted frontals. Like you can see the charge of the worm, you can interrupt most of the cast. You can one monk ring can save you from the screech or a one personal. I think the time is very forgiving, so you could even push us back to a C maybe. Honestly, I think there's these two keys are the best keys of the season for sure because they are just so easy to heal. there's no many threats. People are in panic stations. Even if you do pools, there's nothing that's going to do crazy work. Brackenhide Hollow on a fortified week. There is a lot of bleeds, a lot of casters. You're looking at B and A here. It's not as deadly as ST here. There's you can dodge a lot of the bleeds. You can interrupt a lot of the cast. There's a lot of avoidable damage, and I think that's why I don't really put it up as an SRO's Nelth and Halls of Infusion. A lot of the casting mobs, yeah, the tank healing can be intensive. Maybe you can put up here, and the poison if you don't have disease cleanse for a healer. I think that's what brings it up to an A. Like if you don't have the right disease cleanse or dispels, that's what pushes to an A. There's a lot of there's a lot of things that interrupt. And again, you're trying to pull bigger, but I don't think it has as scary mobs as definitely as Nelth or Halls of Infusion. And this may swap, so I'm maybe a B or an A here for Brackenhide. It's not really. I'm more, Tyrannical Brackenhide in that first boss. I'm more worried about healing than I am with fortified healing. Vortex. Vortex probably gets up to an A, maybe even close to an S. Like there is the Assassin. There's a couple of pulls. A lot of the wind bolts and the charge dots do a lot of damage that is unavoidable. So you can interrupt and stun, but there's times there. There's the cloud burst mobs, the dragon mobs. It's probably up in an S tier in fortified. Vortex is pretty like a gross dungeon. Like at high keys, like the dragons do a lot, the assassins do a lot, the wind bolt mobs do a lot, cloud burst mobs do a lot. And then there's all those ancient, Egyptian style mobs at the end that you have to lust those pack. That pack before the last orb set is disgusting, and most time you need to lust it because there is so much AoE damage coming out. And I'd probably put Vortex up as an S tier healing for fortified. Like, maybe you could drop to an A, but it's healing intensive. Like it will for pugs. We'll say non-pugs. I think it could drop down, but if you're in pug mindset here, I don't have people in comms. I'm gonna put that up to S. Uldaman is definitely an A tier, maybe into S tier for its fortified week. There's a lot of tank damage at the start, which kind of needs to be healed through, but a good tank can negate it. There's a lot of the thunderclap mobs, which are from the golems, but they can be line of sight. Like the jagged jaw bites from the little snake dudes. That's another tank buster, but it can be kited. Like this is much better. Uldaman is much better on fortified than is tyrannical. That's for sure. You can do decent sized pulls. As long as you control the mobs, there's a lot of avoidable damage. We could probably put it back down to A tier. I don't think it's. I think it's got. Do I say it heals more than Brackenhide? Do I do more HS than Brackenhide than Uldaman? Maybe yeah. I don't know. These are pretty similar, Brackenhide and Brackenhide and Hollow. Maybe I'll put them up together. Nelth's Lair. This on fortified week is a joke. I don't think there's anything really that comes to mind. There's a lot of stuff that's like at the start with the worms that's avoidable with the poison. You're gonna do some basic healing at the start. Nothing really comes out, no bleeds, nothing that really scares me as maybe a poison. After first was the pelters can kind of be annoying. Like not seeing the pelters is a lot of damage, and of course the avalanche, but you can avoid avalanche, so you don't have to heal through that if people are tracking that. The tank gets a bit of tank busting, but a good tank, you won't have to heal that. Scorch is avoidable later. Like the pelters is probably the biggest mob, and that makes it a bit harder than C. And if people are bad with avalanche, it probably brings it up. Otherwise, it's a pretty easy dungeon. I probably put that as a B. Like I don't really think there's anything in there that scares me as a healer. Not as much as Nelth, Halls, and Vortex. So look, that's my healing tier guide for you guys to help you understand my mindset coming into keys and some of the mobs that kind of scare me or bosses that scare me as a healer. Looking to push those 21 plus keys. If you're interested, even in the low keys, getting used to when your CDs and when you should be managing, and there's a healing intensive fight from a DPSing. So anyway, I've been Mr. Ree. I hope you enjoyed the content. Please give me a follow, like, subscribe, hit up my Patreon, and peace out. And thanks for watching.